Welcome to problem 13.7. In this particular case, you're provided with the demand for the 6 months from July to December. You're also given the costing for holding costs, subcontracting, etc. And you want to make some discs. You're also given information that you have currently 8 people working for you. It takes 4 hours to make a disc, and they work 8-hour days, which is your assumption. So you can make 2 discs per day per employee. In this case, this is different than problem 13.2, which you might have just watched. There are 20 work days in a month, which makes the problem a little simpler to deal with. And you also can have the fact that there are 150 discs currently in stock, which you would like to reduce to 0. So in part A, you vary the workforce so the production meets the demand. And they had 8 workers on or employed or on board, as I said, in June. So what this is a chase strategy where you're going to increase the workforce and decrease the workforce. So in part A, you're going to have hiring and layoff costs. But once we get the inventory dealt with, then there should be really no extra inventory costs because you're trying to make it 0. So there's 400 discs demanded in July, and you don't need to make 400 because you have 150 leftovers. So you really only need to make 250. So the units required would be the demand minus the beginning inventory, and you need to make 250 units. It takes 4 hours to make a unit or a disc, and you divide that by the fact that it takes 8 hours to make a disc per employee. So what you do is, you can see there's 20 days in a month, 8 hours per day. In other words, 160 hours per employee per month. So you take the 1,000 and divide it by 160, or you can take the 1,000 divided by 20 and then divide it by 8, you'll get the same answer. And you need 6.25 employees. Now in this case, they're not allowing part-time people, otherwise that's what you would do. So you're going to have some overages and some shortages. They've rounded it down to 6. So you're going to have 240 units produced by 6 employees, because remember, they produce 40 discs per month, as you can see up above in the calculations, 2 discs per day, 20 days per month, so 40 discs per employee per month. Now you needed 250, which is the units required. So you take the units produced, subtract the units required, and you wind up with a shortfall of 10. You went from 8 employees to 6, so you had layoffs of 2 employees, and it's $80 per employee to lay them off. In August, you're going to be doing some hiring because, for a couple of reasons, your demand went up. So it's typical that if you know that your demand is increasing or has gone up, then you would be doing more hiring. Now, you also have to factor in that you had a shortfall. You have some back orders from July. So you need 510 discs. So you take the demand and subtract the beginning inventory. And because it's negative in this case, so you wind up with 500 minus 10, and you wind up with 510 units required. That takes, you multiply that by the 4 to wind up with 2,040 hours required. You take the 2,040 divided by 160, or again, you could divide it by 20 and then divide it by 8, either way. So you wind up with 12.75 employees. In this case, they rounded it up to 13. So you're gonna have to do a bit of rounding. And 13 employees can produce 520 units because they can produce 40 discs per month per employee. And so you can produce 520 units. So units produced are 520. The units required are 510, so you have 10 leftovers. Now, in this particular case, you went from 6 employees to 13. So you're going to go on out and do some hiring. Each employee that you hire costs you $40. And so you take the 40 and you times those up by the 7, and you wind up with 280. Now in September, you're going to go from 500 demanded, 500 units to 550. Now, a good manager will know that their employees can produce 40 discs per month. So they're saying, roughly, I'm going to need another person. 50 divided by 40. So in this particular case, again, you go through the math. And you have 10 leftovers from the previous month, so you don't only have to make 550. You only have to make 540. You multiply it by the 4 to get 2,160, divided by 16 to get 1,350. And then you need to hire one more person. And you produce 560 units, and which means now you have a surplus of 20, or ending inventory of 20, and you need to hire one more person. And you continue on, as you can see in the example. Now, you're going to have to do some totaling at the very end. You have 10 units left over in end of August and 20 at the end of September. And so you have 30 units of inventory. It's $8 a unit for your holding costs, as it says in the problem. So the very first information given to you is $8 per disc per month. You, of course, multiply, and you get $240 of holding costs. The hiring and layoff costs, as you can see, they've done a very nice job of showing it on the screen here, of a total of $960 between hiring and laying off. So you laid off 5 employees. And then you hired, overall, you actually hired 14 employees. Total cost for that is $960. The sum of the two is $1,200. Now, in part B, we're going to have overtime. So in this particular case, we're going to have a constant workforce, and we will have level production. So in this case, we're going to keep the workforce at a level of producing 1,300 units per month, and then you're going to have overtime for the rest. So the regular production, in this case, sorry, I think I said 1,300. I apologize, that's incorrect. You're going to have 5, you're going to have a constant workforce of 8. All right, sorry about that. So in other words, you're going to produce 320 units. 8 workers times 40 discs per month is 320. And the rest you're going to deal with as overtime. So in this particular case, in the first month, you're going to produce 320, no matter what, and your demand is 400. So you actually are going to have a surplus or ending inventory because you had 150. So 150, which is the ending inventory, plus production of 320 is 470, minus the demand of 400 leaves you with the 70 as the ending inventory. The holding costs are $8 per unit. 70 times 8 is 560. And after this month, you have no inventory left over, so we don't have to worry about that. So it reduces our inventory costs, or holding costs for inventory in particular. So in August, you have demand for 500. You produce 320 with regular employees. So that means that you take the ending inventory of the 70, you add the production of 320. So you have 390 units available for sale, and you have demand of 500. So you have a shortfall of 110, and you ask employees or require them to work overtime. and you're going to produce 110 units in overtime. And then from there, there's no beginning inventory anymore. It's zero. So what you're going to simply do is take the demand minus the production, because in all cases, it's greater than the production. And the difference between the two will be satisfied by creating overtime or using overtime. So you have, in this case, you have the 70 units of ending inventory for a total cost of 560. You have to create 1,580 units of discs by paying overtime, and overtime is assumed to be 1.5 times or 1.5. So rather than paying $48, you are going to be paying 72. So there's extra. You would have had to pay the 48 anyways. And you multiply the 1,580 units that you're going to make with overtime, and you wind up with 37,920 plus the holding cost of 560 for an extra cost of 38,480. And that's how you solve this particular problem. This is not a simple problem. So if you have questions, please ask during the live lecture.